On the heels of the summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Chinese President Xi Jinping welcomed Russian President Vladimir Putin to Beijing Saturday. The two leaders signed more than 30 deals, including bilateral investments in energy, agriculture, transportation, aerospace and the military. Xi Jinping said China and Russia are major economies and emerging markets and called for the integration of the Belt and Road Initiative and the Eurasian Economic Union. We begin with our coverage with CCTV's Wang Tongxuan in Beijing. Thanks for joining us. Let's start with some of the details. A multi-billion-dollar high-speed rail deal was among the many deals signed between China and Russia. What can you tell us about this project?
Well, Nathan, talks concerning the construction of Russia's first high-speed rail has been ongoing for several years, but a huge cost of the project that has proved to be the major obstacle, with an estimated cost of $19 billion, really forcing Russian officials to look for outside investment in the project. So it's no surprise that this was the amount the city also deals signed during Putin's visit to Beijing, and China is expected to invest a total of $6.2 billion in the project. The Moscow-Kazan route is nearly 800 kilometers long, and the railway is scheduled to be completed by 2018 in time for the Football World Cup, for which Kazan is one of the host cities. And with a maximum design speed of 400 kilometers per hour, it will carry millions of passengers every year and reduce travel time from 14 hours to 3.5. Both representatives from Russia and China say that the Moscow-Kazan project isn't just an investment for China, but a means to improve communication and trade with Russia and even Europe. Nathan.
Yeah, Russia needs high-speed rail given the vast distances. Tongxuan, why is broadly cooperation so important between China and Russia? And given what's going on in the rest of the world, what message does it send?
Well, Nathan, unlike China's relationship with the United States and the European Union, economic relations between Beijing and Moscow aren't quite as healthy as their political ones. For example, the bilateral trade volume between China and the U.S. has already exceeded $550 billion for 2015, whereas China and Russia trade volume hovers below $90 billion. So given the Western sanctions imposed on Russia even over the Ukraine crisis, the sharp decline of oil prices and depreciation of the ruble, Russia has started to shift its attention from west to east. And China is seeing Russia as an important partner in its Belt and Road Initiative. Its rich oil and gas and natural resources all interest the Chinese investors. In an interview with Xinhua news agency, Putin also proposed the Eurasian Economic Union, EEU, and China established a free trade area and to open up to other interested countries. President Xi echoed his counterpart and called to expand cooperation by advancing the synergy of China's Belt and Road Initiative with the EEU. And moreover, this year also marked the 15th anniversary of the signing of the China-Russia Good Neighborly Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation, which also explains why they have been shoulder to shoulder and supporting each other on a range of issues. Nathan.
Tongxuan, thanks for breaking it down for us. Really appreciate your reporting from Beijing. Thank you. Joining us now from Beijing is Wang Tao. He's the Assistant Director of the China Business News Research Institute. From Hong Kong, we're joined by Victoria Panova. She's the Director of the Oriental Studies Institute at the Far Eastern Federal University in Russia. And also with us is Yan Sun. She's a Senior Associate with the East Asia Programme at the Stimson Centre. And lastly, from Bangkok, we're joined by Pepe Escobar. He's a geopolitical analyst and author. His latest book is called 2030, but we are still in 2016, and let's start with Wang Tao in Beijing. Obviously, a flurry of deals as usual with Russia and China signed. Take us through some of them. We had energy deals, but also, can you address the fact that even though we see all these deals, the actual trade between Russia and China has been going down recently?
Well, I think that's mostly because the oil price has dropped down so much. So even though that China may actually increase the import from Russia, and also now Russia is the #1 oil exporter to China, beating Saudi in the last 3 months, this still inevitably reflect to a lower export revenue from China to Russia. So this is mostly reflecting the drop of the oil prices. But overall, I think there is an increasing economic tie between China and Russia. And with all these connections that we have heard and all these new deals, this is going to be deepened between China and Russia, over a longer term.
Victoria, in Hong Kong, the Russian perspective, we saw a lot of business people go with Vladimir Putin. The world, especially here in America, thinks everything is sort of focused on gas and oil. But there is seemingly between Beijing and Moscow a move to try and expand bilateral trade as well as and deepen it too. Can you give us some insights?
Sure. Well, certainly energy will stay on the agenda, and it will be a vital part of the agenda. But of course, it's in the interest of both countries, Russia and China, to rebalance a bit the structure of export. And that's what's happening already. And this was also seen as a result of Putin's visit to Beijing. We already saw the surge in the agricultural exports from Russia, and I'm sure this will be a very good and it's a very prospective area which should be explored further. There are also deals in machinery, supplies not only from China to Russia, but also from Russia to China. And I think there were about 58 projects, investment projects that were kind of approved by the two leaders during this visit. And just to support the previous speaker, I should say, yes, this is because of their ruble-dollar equivalent that the trade turnover went down a bit. But as you also know, during their meeting, the two leaders agreed that this should be reversed, and they specified a number of steps in order to reach $200 billion turnover by 2020, which is, I think, is a good way to go. And when we set targets like this, we usually even go over the designated figures. So let's be optimistic.
Yunson, here in DC, I want you to pick up on what Victoria said. I think it was Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, who set that 200 billion target, even though actually 100 billion had been set. You see a sort of meshing, or do you, between China's One Belt, One Road initiative and Russia's Eurasian Economic Union, the EU? Can that work together, or do you feel that they still have a lot of things to iron out? Because some critics have said a lot of these projects, while they're signed, they've been very slow to be implemented.
Well, that is certainly the case, at least from the American policy community perspective, because in the past we know that Russia and China had signed a lot of deals, especially on the energy cooperation. But how those MOUs were working out in the end was just not very...
memorandums of understanding.
Yeah, memorandum of understanding. They were the implementation were kind of disappointing. And now when people look at the deals that that China and Russia has signed, people look at it with a curiosity and the question that whether it will actually be implemented in the future. So we will have to see. There are some overlapping aspects in China's aspiration in the One Belt, One Road area, and in Russia's interest in developing the Eurasia, their business ties and economic cooperation in that area. Although we also have to look at that issue with two aspects. First of all, of course, there will be potential for cooperation. But on the other hand, people cannot help but also wonder whether there's going to be an element of competition. Because traditionally, from the geostrategic point of view, Central Asia and Eurasia is regarded as Russia's traditional sphere of influence.
Soviet space,
yeah. So for China to launch into it by an economic initiative called One Belt, One Road, there is inevitably going to be some geostrategic implication of that. And how Russia is going to take it remains to be seen.
That's really interesting. Let's go to Bangkok now. Pepe Escobar, I'd like you to pick up on that point, but also, for world watchers generally this week, we saw, while the West kind of disintegrating with the Brexit and the potential EU, we saw that it was Putin and President Xi sort of standing there side by side, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization as well, adding new members. Was that just optics, or is there something more going on?
Yeah, everything is going on at the moment. In fact, I did my own particular experiment. I was covering Brexit out of Hong Kong, and the day that Putin went to meet Xi Jinping in China, I did my own tour of the Pearl River Delta, which is one of the three major poles of development in China now and for the foreseeable future. So what we are seeing at the moment is amazing. It's the slow disintegration of the European Union project as it is, because it's not a Europe of peoples. It's a Europe of certain privileged businesses, especially the financial business, and including the City of London, of course, which is going to be, if everything goes according to the non-plan, let's put it this way, is going to be out of the EU. So the new EU center is going to be Frankfurt or Paris. Meanwhile, what we see the closer political, geostrategic, geoeconomic integration of One Belt, One Road, the Asian Investment Bank, the new BRICS New Development Bank, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the Russia-China Strategic Partnership. So the political articulation between all these different institutions is absolutely staggering. And there is complementarity in the Russia-China Strategic Partnership. There's, of course, as one of our guests already said, there's going to be competition, but basically it's Eurasia. Everything is about Eurasia integration. It's a long-term project and process. It's going to take at least 10 to 15 years, and it has already started. And this is something that the West leadership from the US to the EU, they hadn't seen it coming, and they still don't know how to deal with it.
Tao, I want you to pick up on that point. You know, I think it was the 15th meeting between the two presidents since 2013. From Beijing, is there a perception that this is a new geostrategic alliance between Moscow and Beijing? Or, I think you've noted, could there be a bit of fantasy about this as well?
Yes, that's a little bit extraordinary for, I think, the two leaders meet so often. I think it's quite possible that President Putin is the one that President Xi Jinping say most during his term, and probably vice versa. So it is actually a reflection of increasing personal friendship between these two leaders, but also this is a reflection of the necessity in the Asia-Pacific area that they need to find a new way to change the existing regimes, so there will be more spaces for the emerging economies such as China, India, and Russia, and also to have the necessary adjustment as the world is moving. I think what we have seen these days, especially as some of the other commentators already mentioned, with the Brexit and disintegration of the EU, and also the stronger relationship between China and Russia, there is a lot of uncertainties in the future in the geopolitics in the world. And the leaders feel they have to find some ways to strengthen their positions for this future. I think this actually reflects that necessity. And I think for China and Russia, there is no such a fantasy that China and Russia are actually going to be a new dominance. I think it's still, people be very realistic that realizing US is the superpower, and even without the Britain, or not, EU is still quite an important player in the world stage, and China is actually looking for find a way to get more space in the international order for its own space, for its own development, and to have the leadership as a rising power. I don't think this is something that China and Russia will stand together to create something new. It's more about complementary to the existing system, and the reason being that, especially because this East Asia is the driving force of all this change. We have seen all the growth, maybe the majority of the growth these days of the world economy coming from the East Asia, and probably also plus India, so emerging economy is the major driver, but we haven't got the system to accommodate that kind of change. So there is a lot of change that needed in this region, and we are actually experimenting and trying to find a good way of that.
Victoria Panova, I want you to pick up on that. There has been some criticism saying that Russia has almost been forced to go east because of Western sanctions imposed after the reabsorption of Crimea into Russia, and that it has to do deals with China and is therefore a junior partner. Is that something you can address?
Well, first of all, I cannot say that. I mean, it looks like we had probably more meetings since their confrontation with the West started between of Russia. But I can tell you that it was this understanding that Russia should go more and should pay much more attention to the East and to its China as its neighbor and as a friend, already starting mid-90s with Primakov and multi-vector diplomacy, and then we had a complete regulation of our border issues by 2004, the final like 4%. Yes. And then, so it's been gradual. Like China is always patient and it takes time for it to, it can wait for the results to come, and probably in the same passion, Russia and China were looking at each other and doing small steps to get closer. And now we're at the point when we can go a little faster. And that's where I also want to pick up a bit on the previous statement that, of course, there is, I would totally agree that there is a complementarity not only to the existing system of Russia and China, but also a complementarity of interests of both states. And I think even with the possible competition that could occur at Central Asia, we still could be, Russia is a provider of stability. China is mostly about economy and investments, and we are doing the right job of having Central Asia develop peacefully and also providing for our own economic and political development. And I think in this way we need each other, and we also know that we can stay back to back and be complementary in terms of, we know that there is a reliable partner, reliable neighbor, and we don't have to worry about our back being stabbed. So this is important.